Hey guys, Derek is here with Team Futaba, and today I wanted to take you guys through some setup tips for the Futaba 14SG radio. Some of the items in here are also applicable to the 8FG. The programming language between the two is very similar, so if you have that radio, this is worth your while as well. Some of the items I have in here are aimed towards the newcomer to the Futaba radio series. Maybe you just got a 14SG or you're looking to get one, and this will help you initially set up your model, as well as find out some of the little features in the radio that a lot of people either skip over or don't even realize are in there. Similarly, if you've had the radio for a while, some of these things you may have missed or maybe just didn't even know about. So whether you're a beginner or an experienced user, this video should be worth your while to watch, and I hope you guys enjoy. Okay guys, so as I said in the introduction, I just wanted to go through and show you some of the basic setup items you will encounter when creating a new model on your 14SG radio. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up the radio, and the first screen we're presented with here is the model selection screen. By default, this is not what you will see on a new radio. I will talk about how to enable this a little bit later on, but for now we're going to scroll over to where it says new, and I'm going to create a brand new model for this video. I'm going to hold return. And the next screen I'm presented with here is the model type. So because we're going to use helicopters for this setup, I'm just going to leave the type as helicopter. Now the next setting here is the swash type. Now generally the flybarless units out there today are all going to require the H1 swash type. If you're running an older flybarred machine using 120 degree CCPM mixing, you will want to set that to H3. There may also be some flybarless units out there that require H3 as well, but most of the ones I see, the V-Bar or the CGY 750, require H1 for a swash type because they do all their mixing within the flybarless unit itself. So we're going to go ahead to the next screen, and the next screen here is where we choose our transmission type. And this has to be matched to the receiver that we are trying to link to. Depending on what receiver you're using is what's going to dictate which mode you're going to use here. Futaba has their fastest 12 channel as well as their fastest 14 channel modes. The 14 channel is here as well. These would be used if you're using the R7003 S-Bus receiver or the R7008 S-Bus receiver. Those are the telemetry-enabled receivers that Futaba has at the moment, and those will use one of those two transmission types. The difference between them is the 14-channel mode is if you are running external sensors to the S-Bus 2 port on your receiver. So if you were running a temperature sensor or the Futaba GPS unit, you would want to select the 14-channel mode. If you were just wanting to monitor, say, your receiver pack voltage or your BEC voltage, you would select the 12-channel mode. Also, if you wanted to use the external voltage sensor with the R7008 S-Bus receiver, you could do so and leave it in 12-channel mode. The primary difference between the two is the 12-channel mode has a lower latency than the 14-channel mode, so if you can, you probably want to stick with the 12. Most people probably won't really feel the latency difference, to be honest with you, but I would try to stick with the 12 unless you're running the sensors that require the 14. Anyway, some of the other ones in here are the fast multi. So a lot of the helicopter receivers we use that aren't telemetry enabled will use fast multi, such as the 6203, 6303, 6108, 6208. There's quite a few in that list, so you're just going to want to check and see which one you have. There's also 7-channel mode. This is for the smaller non-S-Bus receivers. This does not include the 3-channel 6203 or 6303 receivers though, so don't think it's this one. You will have to use multi-mode for those because they are S-Bus enabled. We also have SFHSS, which is the other transmission type Futaba has that we see on some of the flybarless units coming out now, like the Align MRS unit and the T-Rex 150 DFC. So that lets you link directly to the unit itself with this transmission type without a receiver, which is pretty nice. So for this setup, I'm just going to go ahead and use fast multi just for the discussion here. And that's kind of setting up a new model. Now, before we go to our next section here, I'm going to show you something that I see a lot of people maybe not realize or forget to do on their new setups. And that is to disable the left dial and right dial on their 14SG. Now I'm going to slide the radio towards me a little bit so you can see these two dials here. So that's these two guys right here, so the left and the right. By default, these are linked to your pitch and throttle curve, and if these are not perfectly centered up right here, if they're off here or something, and you do not disable them, your setup, either your pitch curve or your throttle curve, will be kind of messed up and you might have some problems. So the first thing that I recommend doing is going into the pitch curve, which we can find under the model menu here. We're just going to go down and highlight it, and I'm going to go to the next page, and you can see right now, if I scroll down here, the left dial is turned to on by default. This is on a new model, so we want to highlight this and inhibit it. And we want to do the same thing for the throttle curve menu. That will disable the right dial. And now the reason this is so important, and actually I'm going to give you a little demonstration here, is if you have them not centered, it will mess up your pitch curve pretty badly. I'm just going to go to the pitch curve here, and if I center, actually you can see right now, I'm turning that left dial. So if I had this all the way to one side, you can see my pitch curve no longer is linear. It's curved in the middle. So if I set up some center stick to be 0 degrees of pitch with the dial like this, I will have all kinds of weird things going on. I'll have unequal up and down pitch and all sorts of things we don't want going on. So the best thing to do is to go to the next menu here and inhibit this so that that does not happen. And you'll see now, let me go back to the pitch curve. You'll see now it's perfectly linear, and I'm moving the dial left and right and it's not doing anything. That's what we want to do to ensure we don't mess up our setup. And same thing with the throttle curve. This is just as important, especially on a nitro, if you're trying to set up your throttle barrel linkage and you have this off center at the middle. It's going to just mess everything up. So just make sure that you disable both of those. They're enabled by default. I don't know why, but you do want to make sure that you inhibit them for virtually any setup that I've seen out there. So we'll go on to the next segment. Okay guys, so the next thing I'm going to show you here is just a quick trick to make adjusting your throttle curves a little bit easier, especially if you're running an electric helicopter. A lot of the times, some of the governors out there require you to just move a flat curve up and down. So this will kind of help with that and make it just a little bit faster, especially if you're dialing something in. So I'm going to go to my model menu, I'm going to go to throttle curve, and what we're going to do is disable these middle 3 points so that we don't have to adjust those. We'll only have to adjust, we'll only have to adjust the 100% and 0% as they are right now, points on the curve. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and highlight the right column of the 0.4 here, and I'm just going to hold return. You can see those numbers disappear now because that point's disabled. To re-enable it, I'll just hold return again, and it'll turn back on. For now, I'm going to disable this one, and this one. And that's going to make my life a lot easier because now when I adjust 0.1 up, you can see it's moving the whole thing up along with it equally. So now I can have my nice flat 100% throttle curve and not have to adjust all 5 points. You can't disable the 1 and 5 points, you can only disable the middle 3, but it definitely makes it a lot easier when adjusting the curve, because then you only have 2 points to adjust instead of 5. So that's my first trick for you guys here. Okay, so the next thing I have here is how to disable trims. Now, a lot of the fiberglass units out there, like the CGY 750 or some of the other ones, you might want to disable one or more of your trims to avoid bumping it in flight and disturbing, say, your rudder gyro. On the CGY in particular, I like to disable my rudder trims so that I don't accidentally have any in any of my flight modes. So to do that, we're going to go to the linkage menu, and we're going to go to function, And now that we're in the function menu, what I'm going to do is scroll down to where it says rudder, and then the trim here is T4. So this is the default channel mapping right now, and you can see at the top of the screen we have control and our trim. So the control for rudder is J4, which is the left and right on the left stick. And the trim assigned to that is T4. So to disable the trim, all I'm going to do is highlight T4 and go over to my double dashed lines here, and my trim is now inhibited. Now, what's a little confusing for a lot of people is if I go back to the home screen here and I start moving my rudder trim, you can see that there's still numbers being input down here. So you might think, oh, it's still putting trim through. But in reality, if we look at our servo menu here and we look at channel 4, as I'm moving this trim right now, it's still remaining at 0. So we are not changing the center point, or any point really, of the channel 4 rudder channel right now. So we can say that our trim is indeed disabled, even when it is still showing numbers here on the main screen. So you can also do the same for your cyclic trims too. If your fiberglass unit never needs trim and you're afraid that might mess it up, you could go ahead and unassign the trim control from the channel, and that will effectively disable the trim. So that's my next trick. Okay guys, so the next thing I have here is how to kind of scroll through the menus a little bit faster. So I see a lot of people kind of, there's a lot of selections in a lot of these menus, and it can, you're doing all this scrolling and stuff, and there's a couple little things you can do to just kind of speed up how you get through some of these menus. The first thing is hitting S1. So S1 is saying this model menu. Well, actually, when I'm at the top of the screen like this, you can see my highlighter is on model menu. If I tap S1 quickly, it will scroll to the next page. So I can scroll through pages pretty quickly like that. And that's handy in, say, my pitch curve menu when I went to disable my left dial. I can just hit S1 and it'll go to the next page. The other handy thing about S1 is if I say I'm down here in a menu, and some menus have like 20 different selections, so you gotta sit here and go like this to get all the way back to the top. Well, an easy way to get back to the top of the menu so you can easily exit it is to simply just tap S1. Now, if you notice, it did change the page, but it also bumped me back up to the top of the screen here. And now if I just hit return, it backs me out of the menu, and I can go to my next setting right here without having to, scroll all the way through whatever I may have here to get back up to throttle hold so I can hit return. So that makes it just a little bit faster to get through menus. It helps me a little bit and just makes things a little bit easier. So that's my next trick. Okay guys, so the next thing here is making Expo Settings a little bit easier. To do that, we're going to go to our model menu, we're going to go to dual rate, and in here is where we set our expos. By default, expo is assigned to condition. So what this means is, by default, the expo can be independently controlled by each of your conditions or each of your flight modes. So normal mode will have, you can have one expo set up, idle up 1. If we watch the bottom of the screen, we'll have another set. Idle up 2 will have another set. Throttle hold will have a set, and idle up 3 would have a set if you enabled that as well. So if you're playing around with Expo, this can be a little bit of a pain because you've got to go through each individual flight mode and adjust both sides of the Expo. So to make this a little bit easier, because if you're like me, I just run the same Expo in every flight condition. All I do is click on condition and change it over to switch. So what I'm now doing is, instead of my expos being dependent on condition or flight mode, I'm telling it to be dependent on a switch. but I'm not going to assign a switch to it. I'm just going to leave it with no switch. And basically this creates it so there's only one expo for all your flight mode conditions. So now I only have to set my expo once, and if I put just 9% here just for argument's sake, no matter what mode I flip into, I'm flipping in and out, idle up, my expo isn't going to change. It's going to stay 9%. And now obviously here this is a two-sided menu too, so this is left aileron and this would be right aileron, so make sure you adjust both sides. And just as another reminder, Futaba Expo is the opposite of JR or Spectrum. You want to make it negative to soften the feel and positive to sharpen the feel around center. It's also important to note here that you can independently adjust aileron as well as elevator and rudder here. And you can see here that I'm going to have to go to each one and set it to switch so that the flight modes aren't controlling my rudder, or excuse me, my expo. So that's making expo setup a little bit easier. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is how to turn on throttle hold. By default, this actually isn't assigned to anything, if you can believe that. So we're going to go ahead and scroll over to the model menu, and we're going to go to condition. And condition here lists all our different flight modes, or conditions that we have available. And as you can see at the bottom, hold doesn't have a switch assigned to it. So there's no way to flip into hold by the the default conditions laid out in here. So we're going to go and scroll down to the double dashed lines here, and we're going to assign hold to a switch. I prefer switch G, which is the upper rear switch. So I'm going to pick switch G, and then you notice the on-off is highlighted here, and if I hit return again, it's going to bring me to this screen. Now I like it so one click up is on and two clicks up is also on. So I have my switch all the way back right now, so throttle hold's off, which is what I want. And if I go one click up, it'll turn on, or if I accidentally went two up, that would also turn it on. You could obviously configure that however you wanted, or to any other switch if you wanted to. I just prefer switch G myself. Here you could also disable, say, idle up 3 if you didn't want to use that. A lot of times I don't use idle up 3, so I'll pick SF, I'll highlight SF and come into here. And similar to some of the other screens we've looked at, we'll pick the double dash lines, highlight this, and just disable it. I'm just going to keep hitting return to get out of there. And now idle up 3 is disabled. You could also reassign your idle up switch in here if you so chose to do so, but most people don't, including myself. So we're just going to leave that alone. And that is enabling throttle hold and disabling idle up 3. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you how to set up is the model selection on startup feature that the radio offers. The advantage of this is every time you turn on your radio, it will ask you which model you want to fly. So it's kind of a little reminder to make sure that you have the correct model selected. It is not model match, so it will not prevent your radio from transmitting to a receiver that isn't perhaps installed on the same model as you're attempting to fly. But it is a nice little reminder to just kind of poke you in the side and say, hey, make sure you have the right model. So I'm going to show you how to set that up right now. To turn it on, we're going to go to System, go up to Start Select. Mode is off by default. You have two options here, either Model Select or Quick Select. Model Select gives you a list when you turn the radio on to pick from, versus Quick Select, which gives you 4 options to choose. So you'll have 4 models, and to pick one, you either tap Linkage, Model, System, or S1 here on the scroll wheel screen. I prefer model selection myself, so I'm going to show you that setup. You could play around with quick selection as well if you want. It's the same kind of setup. So I'm going to pick model select, and over here it's MDL by default. Now we want to change this to always. So this way, every time we turn on the radio, it's going to ask us what model do you want to fly. So I'll show you that right now. So if I turn my radio off and boot it back up, you can see it gives me this list of models. I can pick, if I want to fly T-Rex 700 Nitro, I could pick that. It'll tell me I changed, and hey, now I'm on T-Rex 700 Nitro. So that's just a quick little thing that is just an extra little reminder. Personally, it helps me out a little bit. I've never had an issue with picking the wrong model because of it, so I definitely recommend it for most people. Okay guys, so the last thing I'm going to show you here is how to set up a timer. Believe it or not, most people or a lot of people I should say, come up and ask me how to do this, so I'm just going to show you quickly. All you do is on this home screen here is highlight T1 or T2, and then we're just going to click on it. And that'll bring us to this menu, which has a ton of different options here. You can choose whether you want the timer to count up or count down. I like it to count down myself. You can pick how much time you want it to go for. I'm just going to put 4 minutes for now. It's not really that important. At the bottom here, you can select your vibratory alert. There's a couple different types here. Some will buzz, like just one long buzz. Others will do a couple buzzes. So you can play around here. If you pick one, it'll start buzzing. You might be able to hear that right now, depending on the type you picked, to kind of give you a feel for what it will do at the end of the countdown. Also, we have up here where we assign a switch to start the timer, stop the timer, and how to reset it. Personally, I only really ever set up the start. It's just what works for me. I usually go here, go to SE, which is my idle up switch. And I usually have it turn on either idle up 1 and 2 or just idle up 2, depending on what head speeds I might have set up. So that's setting up a timer on here. You can play around with this a little bit. You can make it start on a stick or any other kind of combination. There's a lot of freedom here to program the timer as you see fit. I myself just like the SE, as I said before. Just tying it to my idle up switch seems to work best because I fly around and idle up all the time. So that concludes some of my tips and tricks for working with the 14SG here. I hope you found these useful, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at the address at the conclusion of this video. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you out the flying field soon.